right. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Bhajana Randana Yashodanandana Bhajana Randana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivajaka Ashtoto to the Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivajaka Ashtoto to the Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnava Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On the second day of April, 2024 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 6 entitled Dhyāna-yoga, the yoga of meditation. And we're on text 30 at the bottom of page 282. Yo mam pashyati sarvatra sarvam cha mahi pashyati tasyaham na pranashyami na cha me na pranashyati yo mam pashyati sarvatra sarvam cha mahi pashyati tasyaham na pranashyami sachame na pranashyati yo mam pashyati sarvatra. Okay, because you had the other book. Yeah, okay. So page 282. We'll start the second chanting. That's okay. So that's your own book you brought. Yeah, it has a different pagination. Okay. Yo mam pashyati sarvatra sarvam cha mahi pashyati tasyaham na pranashyami sachame na pranashyati. Page 282. Yo mam pashyati sarvatra sarvam cha mahi pashyati tasyaham na pranashyami sachame na pranashyati. Go ahead, Chad. Yo mam pashyati sarvatra sarvam cha mahi pashyati tasyaham na pranashyami sachame na pranashyati. Yo mam pashyati sarvatra sarvam cha mahi pashyati tasyaham na pranashyami sachame na pranashyati. Yo mam pashyati sarvatra sarvam cha mahi pashyati tasyaham na pranashyami sachame na pranashyati. Anyone else on this side? Okay. Okay, hello? Haribol. Please don't put that on the floor. You can just tuck it under the book. Anyone want to try chanting? Go ahead. Yo mam pashyati sarvatra sarvam cha mahi pashyati tasyaham na pranashyami sachame na pranashyati. Professional. Anyone online? Come on, Tapas.
Yo mam pashyati sarvatra
Yo mam pashyati sarvatra
sarvam cha mahi pashyati
sarvam cha mahi pashyati
tasyaham na pranashyami
tasyaham na pranashyami
sachame na pranashyati.
sachame na pranashyati. Okay, so I will read the word by word meanings myself. You read along. Yaha, whoever, mam, me, of course Krishna speaking, pashyati, sees, sarvatra, everywhere, sarvam, everything, cha, and mayi, in me. Pashyati, sees, tasya, for him, aham, I, na, not, pranashyami, am lost. Saha, he, cha, also, may, to me, na, nor, pranashyati, is lost. Now this is the one verse in the Bhagavad Gita that has an English translation that's actually poetic. It rhymes. For one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I am never lost, nor is he ever lost to me. Purport. A person in Krishna consciousness certainly sees Lord Krishna everywhere, and he sees everything in Krishna. Such a person may appear to see all separate manifestations of the material nature, but in each and every instance, he is conscious of Krishna, knowing that everything is a manifestation of Krishna's energy. Nothing can exist without Krishna, and Krishna is the Lord of everything. This is the basic principle of Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is the development of love of Krishna, a position transcendental even to material liberation. At this stage of Krishna consciousness, beyond self-realization, the devotee becomes one with Krishna in the sense that Krishna becomes everything for the devotee, and the devotee becomes full in loving Krishna. An intimate relationship between the Lord and the devotee then exists. In that stage, the living entity can never be annihilated, nor is the personality of Godhead ever out of the sight of the devotee. To merge in Krishna is spiritual annihilation. A devotee takes no such risk. It is stated in the Brahma Samhita 538. Premanjanat chudita bhakti vilochanena santak sadaiva dedayeshu vilokayanti yang shyama sundadamachinda gunaswarupam govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. I worship the primeval Lord, Govinda, who is always seen by the devotee whose eyes are anointed with the pulp of love. He is seen in his eternal form of Shyama Sundar, situated within the heart of the devotee. Close quote. At this stage, Lord Krishna never disappears from the sight of the devotee, nor did the devotee ever lose sight of the Lord. In the case of a yogi who sees the Lord as Paramatma within the heart, the same applies. Such a yogi turns into a pure devotee and cannot bear to live for a moment without seeing the Lord within himself. Om jnana timirandasya jnanandjana shalakaya chakshurun militam mena tasmai shri gurave namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara, the disciplic succession of gurus and disciples. So, Krishna has been describing the process of meditative yoga. That's what dhyana means. Dhyana means meditation. And it's commonly called Ashtanga yoga because it has 8 limbs. Ashta means 8, Anga means limbs. 8 phases. So it begins with yama and niyama. Yama are the things you need to refrain from, and niyama are the things you need to do. And if you think about it, any process we want to undertake, a discipline in which we want to have a goal to achieve, say you want to play a musical instrument, or you want to become an expert car mechanic, or anything like that. Or in college, you can become an expert doctor or whatever. So, first of all, you need a source of knowledge, usually a teacher, a personal teacher, and along with books. And then there's a course of discipline. Anyone who goes to college knows that, okay, you got to attend class, you got to be on time, and there are tests and things like that you have to do. And there are things you don't want to do, you can't do. You can't party all night, every night of the week and expect to then take the test on Friday and pass it. You need to control yourself and study and do those things. So this is true for Bhakti Yoga also. Bhakti Yoga is Krishna consciousness, sometimes called Bhakti Marga. Marga means a path in Sanskrit. So it's a path, it's a road, a process. And there are various do's and don'ts on this path also. Any yoga path is tend to lead you to a goal. In this case, samadhi would be the final element. I'll just go through real quick. You have yama, niyama, the don'ts and the do's. Then you have asana. Asana, you may be familiar with. It's common in yoga studios. That's standing on your head and twisting and all. These are called asanas. But asana basically means sitting. Just like this is an asana. This is called the vyasasana. This is the seat of Vyas, meaning that this is where you speak the Shastra, So asana means the seat. So Krishna describes how one should sit earlier in this chapter. Your back straight, Then he says, looking with the eyes between the eyebrows. I've tried it. I couldn't do that. It gets cross-eyed. But somehow that's what you need to do. And then where to do it? In a sacred place, in a secluded place, clean. So traditionally, yogis would go into the Himalayan forests, and they would sit there to be very austere, and it can get very cold, but they're following it. They're practicing. So that's yama, niyama, asana, and then there's pranayama. Pranayama is popular in Western yoga also. Practice control of the breath. Control of the breath, and I like this because often you breathe in one nostril and out the other, and breathe in one nostril and out the other. It's a way of balancing the inner airs, and it calms the mind. The whole point is to be able to focus the mind on the absolute. Prabhupada mentioned it in relation to bhakti here, how to see Krishna within the heart. This is what he's saying. For one who sees me everywhere, so he sees everywhere outside and also within. You see, Prabhupada talks about that. Those whose eyes are tinged with the salve of love can see the Lord in the heart at all times. So this is a bhakti thing. So then you're meditating, and this is where the whole point is to get a clean place, no distractions, and sit in a certain way for furthering the clarity of the mind. And then comes dharana. So you have yama, niyama, asana, pratyahara, withdrawing the senses from the sense objects. This is a big thing. Because in the material consciousness, ordinary consciousness, our senses are often drawn from one thing to another, especially in this age of Kali. There's so much disturbance. Either it's something that you want to try to enjoy, or something you want to try to avoid, or so many different things. The eyes are going this way, the ears hearing this, and like that. So those senses have to be kind of withdrawn, and you don't want any distraction. The whole idea is to have a very clear mind and to focus it on the object of meditation, which is the Lord in the heart. So that pratyahara means withdrawing the senses. Well, you close the eyes and you draw within. And then comes dharana, which is concentration. You're concentrating the mind is getting distracted, concentrate. It's a discipline. And then comes dhyāna, which is in the title here, which is meditation. You're actually, for some time, able to fix the mind without deviation on the object of meditation. And finally comes samadhi, which is full absorption in the object of meditation. And that, we heard, I'm going to read this again because this is the whole purpose of practicing yoga, is to achieve the state described a few pages back on page 275 and 76. There's 3.5 verses there that describe the ultimate goal of samadhi. Full absorption. So I'll start reading at the bottom of 75. In the stage of perfection called trance or samadhi, one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by the practice of yoga, Dhyāna-yoga. This perfection is characterized by one's ability to see the self, and notice it's a capital self. That's a word that means the supersoul, the Lord within the heart. The self by the pure mind, and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth, and upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of the greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact. So this idea of a boundless transcendental happiness, this is, in Bhakti Yoga, we find that this is defined as premananda, the bliss of the flow of love toward God and feeling the love coming back. Bhakti Yoga, bhakti means reciprocation. It's not just service to God, but God's reciprocation. He's giving you so much happiness, fearlessness, and bliss. This is what's actually the goal. Just like in our ordinary life, we want to maximize the happiness and minimize the distress, right? Of course. And we struggle hard to do that, and we may attain a state where, oh, now I finally succeeded, and I'm really happy. But we know it's temporary, because everything in the material world is temporary. Time is pushing everything. But the soul, the spirit soul, as well as the supreme soul, Krishna, are beyond time. They don't change. We're not, actually, we as souls, we're never born and we never die. But obviously our physical body is born and it dies. And when we identify with the physical body, which most people do, who are you? Well, then you have a name, right? You have an age, you have where you live. All of these pertain to the physical body. But that's not really you. This is a temporary covering for the soul for a certain number of years, and then we leave it. So the point is, what the urgency is that in this human form, we can understand these things. Animals can't do that. They're also living beings, but their consciousness is much more rudimentary. So they have to come up through the species and finally come to human form. And then they have a chance to understand it and end the process. The preliminary goal of every living entity, or certainly of a human being, should be to somehow terminate this process of birth, old age, disease, and death. Birth, old age, disease, and death, which we've been going through for who knows how many millions of times. Now is the chance, and this is the process that's practical for us. This Ashtanga Yoga isn't practical, even though Krishna is giving it here. In a few verses, Arjuna will say, Krishna, I don't think I can do it. I don't think I can do it. He says, Chanchalam imana Krishna pramati balavadridham tasyaham nugaham manye vayurivacha duskaram. You know this verse. There's a scholar over there. So chanchala means flickering. The mind, if you don't do anything, the mind's going here and there, right? Things you remember, the things I got to do, you know. So Arjuna is a Kshatriya. Kshatriya means he's a warrior. He's not by nature, a yogi to sit. So he's saying, oh, this mind is very flickering, very obstinate, very powerful. To control it, as you describe, is more difficult than controlling the wind. Whenever this verse comes up, I always refer back to my time in Miami. I lived there for 6 years working on Bhagavatam. And luckily, while I was there, we never had a full-on, hurricane hit Miami. But there were warnings of one. They come and you follow, the map, and you say, oh, this one's going to hit north, this one's going to hit south. But it's a real problem, and we've seen, anyone who's watched the news in the last 10 years, there's been some pretty serious hurricanes that hit. Houston, and a couple of years ago, Florida had 1 or 2 coming, and then they tend to go up. When I used to live in Long Island, I grew up there in Long Island near New York, and one of those hurricanes came all the way up the coast and went out a little further on the island, but the winds that we experienced were very, very powerful. So these natural forces is used as an analogy that the mind, if it's not peaceful, if you're say someone insulted you on Facebook or something, or you see something that you want and you can't have it, or something that you had is taken away from you, a loved one or something, or you lose the function of your limb, you had a stroke. This is all so disturbing for the mind. You think, oh, what's happened to me, and so much anxiety. So the mind, in a verse earlier in this chapter, it says, Udaret atmanatmanam natmanam avasadiyet atmaiva yatmano bandhu atmaiva udaparatmanaha. One should uplift himself by the mind, not degrade himself. The mind can be the best friend of the living entity and his enemy as well. When the mind is filled with, for instance, if someone insults you, or you suffer an injury from someone, then that sense of animosity and hatred can just take you over, and it affects you physically even. So training the mind is what this yoga is all about. And in Bhakti Yoga, we also have that process. But the culmination is not just to be thinking of Krishna. It's to be serving God. It's to be living with Him. And even on this plane, we can do it. That's the purpose of this temple, is that everything here reminds you of Krishna. Even the things that, just ordinary cushion like that. Well, what is it used for? People sit on it and listen to the Bhagavad Gita class. So that's also related to Krishna, isn't it? What to speak of the deities, which are directly manifestations of Krishna, you can see. And these paintings, these are all little sections of the Shastra and descriptions of pastimes of the Lord and His great devotees. So those who are familiar with us through the books, they're reminded that Prabhupada would call them windows to the spiritual world. He just wouldn't see the pictures, he would enter into the picture and experience it. So that's the purpose of these temples, to give us a place to gather and to hear about Krishna and to glorify Krishna, to take prasadam, the spiritual food offered to Krishna. In this way, to Krishnaize, Prabhupada used the word Krishnaize. The editors, they turned into Krishna eyes, but I like Prabhupada's Krishnaize. Anyway, so this verse describes also a high state. They see Krishna everywhere. How do you see Krishna everywhere? Not just in the temple. You see, I take a walk every day. So I'm walking up Cass Avenue all the way to Wilbur Street. It's about 3/4 of a mile, 2/3 of a mile. So how do I see Krishna as I'm walking there? Of course, I'm chanting Hare Krishna. That helps. But I see, well, here's a tree, you know. So what is that tree? The tree is the soul with very, very rudimentary consciousness. It's a living entity. And due to some misdeed in previous life, is born as a tree. So this consciousness is very covered and has to stand for so many years until finally, you know, the tree dies or something happens, and he goes on to the next birth. So I can see Krishna in that. And what is the body of the tree? The tree is made of bark and wood and so forth. So that's one of Krishna's energies. He explains in the next chapter. Bhuma apa analovayu. All of the solid matter and the liquids and the gases and the energy, the electricity of fire, that's a part of his energy. That's what we're made of. What's the body made of? Well, we have the bones, that's solid matter. There's all the blood and other liquids that are flowing in there, liquids. And fire, and you know, your digestive power is the fire energy. And of course, mind, intelligence, ego, these are also very fine elements. They're not spiritual, they're material, but the spirit within the body can use those to interact with this world and to think and do this thing. So it's an incredible machine that's animated by the presence of the soul. And also Krishna's there also, a super soul, who's giving us, he describes what he does there. Sarvasya chahamriti sannivishto mattak smritir jnanam apohanangsha. I am situated in the heart of every living being, and from me come knowledge and remembrance and forgetfulness also. You see? So he's providing, we call, you know, like a little bird, right, is born. And within a few days, he's already flapping those wings and he's practically ready to fly, you know, after this very short time. So how does that come? We say instinct. That's the super soul giving instruction. Do this, flap it this way, you know, like that. Not just one and the other at the time, but both together. So the intelligence is coming even in rudimentary things. What to speak of human beings? So that representative of God within the heart, we want to be able to perceive and get direct instructions, and for that we need to purify our consciousness. So that he says in the 10th chapter, there's 4 verses we'll get to eventually, 10, 8, 9, 10, and 11, which are said to comprise the essence of the Bhagavad Gita. And there, first Krishna says, everything's coming from me. Aham sarvasya prabhavo mattak sarvam bhavartate. Says, I am the source of everything here. Everything is coming from me. The wise who know this well worship me with all their hearts. How? Next verse. Mat chitta madgata prana. Bodhiyantak parasparam katayantashtamam nityam tushyanti chadamandicha. So first they put their minds on me, just like these yogis. But for us, it's much easier process. We don't have to go off and just come to the Hare Krishna temple, sing this mantra with the devotees. You know, you don't need to be trained. You know, and as soon as you hear that sound and chant it, you're in touch with Krishna. He's manifested. His name he's invested it with his energies. So that's how we can think of Krishna. And Bodhiyantak Parasam, they come together, just like we're coming together, and they glorify me in various ways together. They thought there's so much subject matter, Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam and other things. Katayantas means to speak. Always glorify me. Tushyanti chadamanticha. And that tushyanti means they achieve great satisfaction in this way and great happiness, because Krishna is present in his sound vibration in his name. So then what happens? Then Krishna says, well, how do I reciprocate with them? Tesham satadayuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogantam yena mamapi yantite. Here he says as the super soul. For those who are thus worshiping me, satadayuktanam is always linked to me in yoga, by sound vibration and by thinking. Then I give them the intelligence by which they can come to me. He's in the heart. He's providing that intelligence. Go here, do this, do that. And I remember, I'm not going to go through all the little steps that I took in order to become a Hare Krishna, but it was. But when I finally joined the temple, it's almost exactly 51 years ago now. I looked back and I said, yes, Krishna intervened here, and he intervened here, and he gave me inspiration to go here, and now here I am. Because I was chanting, and I, without, it just happened that way. I was by good fortune following the regulative principles, which I didn't even know what they were. I didn't have a girlfriend or anything like that at that point. And I was eating a very austere diet, a lot of liquids, a lot of juices, carrot juice and all this stuff, all raw food. No one knew the word vegan at that point, 1972. But I was, following that. So with that purification and my practice of yoga and my association with the devotees and so forth, I eventually said, I bet, this is where I belong, in this temple. So I joined, and then afterward I said, yes, Krishna really helped me a lot. So that verse comes out, and then finally the fourth verse, he said, Tesham eva nakampartam, out of great compassion for them, my aspiring devotees, I destroy the ocean of darkness in their hearts, ignorance, with the shining lamp of knowledge, the super soul from within. So that's why Lord Chaitanya, who's Krishna himself, he speaks the Shikshastika. And the very first verse, one of the things he says about chanting, especially congregational chanting, Vidya Vadu Jivanam, it's the life and soul of transcendental knowledge. In other words, since we were eternal, all this knowledge is within us, but we've forgotten it. It's buried now. But when we come in contact with the devotees in the holy name, then that knowledge starts to come out, and we get inspired to act in this way, that for our eternal benefit. So that's why Krishna helps, from within the heart. So here in the verse that we just read, which is very famous because it's a poem, you were out of it. For one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I am never lost, nor is he ever lost to me. I couldn't have done better. So how are we never lost? So Prabhupada says, he sees him everywhere, and as I explained, you can see, there's Krishna's energies, and here's a manifestation of the soul, who is part and parcel of Krishna. So you can see Krishna acting everywhere. He sees everything in Krishna. It means that Krishna is all-pervading. He may appear to see separate manifestations of the material nature, but in each and every instance, he is conscious of Krishna, knowing that everything is a manifestation of Krishna's energy. And that is one of the main lessons of Bhagavad Gita. In the next chapter, we'll read about that. So nothing can exist. Now here's the central principle. You can underline it. Nothing can exist without Krishna, and Krishna is the Lord of everything. This is the basic principle of Krishna consciousness. And then the point of love is that the whole bhakti ultimately means love. And this love culminates in prema. Prema is pure love. What's the difference between prema and kama? Krishna has already talked about kama. So we're familiar with kama. Kama is an ardent desire for anything in the Sanskrit, but beginning with sex desire. So here in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, a wonderful book about Lord Chaitanya, who, as I mentioned, he's the father of the Sankirtan movement, just 500 years ago. So he started this congregational chanting. And in a biography about him, written by a great sage named Krishnadas Kaviraj, which has been printed, Srila Prabhupada translated, he defines the difference between kama and prema. Kama keeps us tied to this material world of suffering. When we try to fulfill the material desires and that's all we know, then we may fulfill them or we may not. But those desires that are impacted in our mind that aren't fulfilled, and kama can never truly be fulfilled. You can satiate it for a little bit, but then it comes back. So that will take you to another body, these unfulfilled desires, because it'll be prominent in your mind when you finally leave the body, and you remember all these things. You may be familiar with people who almost die, near-death experiences, and they describe how their whole life went before their eyes. You may have heard that, So that's a review. So the things that really pleased you, you remember those, and they'll bring you back again for another term, in this prison house of the material body. So how to transform kama into prema? That's what bhakti is all about. So here's the difference. It says, Atmandriya priti vanche tare bali kama. Krishnendriya priti itcha dare prem nama. Very simple. So Krishna is a person. God is a person. He has senses just like we do, but they're perfect. They're never unlimited. But because he's very kind, and he claims all of us as his children. He says, Sarva Yonishakondeva, that I am the Bija Pradakpada, the seed-giving father for every living entity. So everyone is his children. They're all children. But we've gone away from the wonderful land of Goloka Vrindavan, the spiritual world, where what's the characteristic there? No birth, old age, disease, and death. Everything is eternal. And it's Satchit Ananda, eternal, full of knowledge and full of bliss. What is that bliss? Unlimited various exchanges of love with Krishna. And we can hear about that and read about it in the books like especially the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Purana, which is said to be by our acharyas the ripened fruit of all the Vedic writings, culminates in that. And so, and in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the 10th canto, we have an account, not a of course complete account, but an account of Krishna's pastimes in this world that he engaged in 5,000 years ago. And we see there were certain demons who were trying to kill him, and he dispatched them. And that became more subject matter for his devotees to glorify and become in ecstasy. And then there's this idyllic scene where he took the form of a little child, so he could experience motherly affection from Yashoda Mayi and all her friends. You know the pastime. And it's just idyllic, his Krishna is being bound up by his mother. He's afraid, he's crying, he's acting that way, he's the Supreme Personality of God. But he's evoking that emotion, and he's feeling that emotion of filial love. Filial love means what the child feels for the parents. Parental love is what the parents feel. So that's a certain rasa. It's called the rasa, mellow of love. We have those, in this world. They're reflections because they're not eternal, but they're there. Obviously, parental love, friendship, between kids and also between adults. And the servant, the perfect master and the servant, that's also a rasa. And ultimately that's our, basic rasa with Krishna. And then friend to friend, parent to child, and then lover to lover. Krishna's famous gopis, But it's completely pure. And what's the difference? The gopis, they just want to please Krishna. They have no personal desire other than to make Krishna happy. That's their happiness. And that's the purest relationship we can have with anyone. And that's really what makes, even our material relations, wholesome. Is when a friend really wants to help his friend, gives present, right, happy birthday, or goes out of his way to help. So there's a selflessness there. You're taking pleasure in the others being safe or happy or whatever, So in Krishna Bhakti, that's the real happiness of the devotee. To somehow or other please Krishna. Now isn't it wonderful that he makes it so easy? You chant his mantra, that's pleasing to Krishna. That's pleasing. He comes to teach it, and if you take it and you have faith, and why have faith? There's so much we can historically how those who chanted this mantra and practiced this system of bhakti yoga became blissful, and they became fearless in this world because they know they'll never die, even at the point of death. Take me, you're not going to die. You go back to Godhead. Whereas those who have no understanding of that, it's terrifying. I worked in a hospital for a whole year as an inhalation therapist, the one taking the oxygen. I saw so many people die, And usually, they're sedated because it's so disturbing, so disturbing to the mind. Everything I've worked for, all my relationships, this I had, I was taken away. What's happening? What's my future? It's terrifying. And then finally it happens, and we don't see on this side, nobody dies. And then, the afterlife is not pleasant because they're not connected to Krishna. They're still bound up by their material consciousness. So Krishna consciousness, this beautiful verse here, Prabhupada quotes from the Brahma Samhita. Brahma Samhita is the song of Brahma. And at the beginning of the universe, more or less, he chanted this, Premanjana. This is the ointment of prema, Churita Bhakti Vilochanena. I worship the primeval Lord Govinda. That's the last line. Govindam Adi Purusham is the original person. Tamaham Bhajami. I worship him. Each of the verses, there's about 30 of them, ends with that line, who's always seen by the devotee whose eyes are anointed with the pulp of love. So this means to transform your consciousness so you're really loving Krishna. He's giving you that love. It's not, and we have it. It's already there. It's just buried. We can't access it. This is Lord Chaitanya in his teachings to Sanatan. He says, Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhya Kabunoi Shavanadi Shuddha Chitte Kadayayudoi. So the eternal perfection of Prema, Krishna Prema, is there in the heart of every living being, but we can't access it. But Nitya Siddha Sadhya Kabunoi Shavanadi Shuddha Chitte, by the process of hearing, chanting, remembering the 9 processes of bhakti, the consciousness is purified, and that Prema then manifests. It's a question of cleaning our consciousness. So that's a wonderful thing. And here he says, he sees the Santa, that's the saint, the same word in English. Sadaiva always sees within his heart, Vilokayanti is seeing with the eyes of love, Shyama Sundara, the beautiful, bluish blackish form of Krishna playing his flute. Achincha Gunasarupam, who is inconceivable qualities, attractive qualities there. So that's the final goal of the bhakta. None of this merging into the white light, and losing your personality. This shunya body, that everything is a void, and simply if we could just end the pain of birth, old age, that will be perfect. But no, that's not enough. Just if you're in a hospital with you broke your leg and you're in traction. So what you can think about is, when am I going to get out of this hospital? I've been in here for 2 weeks, like that. And finally you get out. Is that your perfection? No, you resume your activity. You resume your life, isn't it? Here, Prabhu, if you're going to sit, you can sit there. Well, that's the thing that we try to separate the ladies. Here, you can have his book. Yeah. Thank you. So the point is you get out of the hospital, but then you have to take up your life again. Right? You're not just going down and sit on the curb, finally I got out. No, then you go back home and you start. So similarly, when we achieve perfection in Krishna consciousness, we resume our original life with Krishna in the spiritual world. It's understood that we're exiles here. This is our natural state. But it's unnatural to forget God and simply be identifying ourselves with a material body, which we're not. We're all eternal spiritual beings. And what is our nature? Sat Chit Ananda. Eternal, full of bliss and full of knowledge. Well, you can contrast it with normal. We're certainly not eternal in these bodies. We're so ignorant, and life is not a bowl of cherries. It's not all bliss, right? We try to have happiness, but it doesn't work out. And so, but we have that capacity for this unlimited happiness in connection to Krishna. And Krishna consciousness is the practical means whereby anyone can, step by step, achieve that through the purifying process of bhakti. So Krishna is describing this process, and as you see in future verses, ultimately Arjuna will reject it. He says, it's not practical for me. And he's such a great devotee, he's a personal friend of Krishna. So then at the end of the whole chapter, Krishna says, don't worry. Yogi nama bisarveshan magaten antaratmana shuddhavam bhajate yomam samayukta. The greatest yogi is one who's always thinking of me within himself, within his heart, and worshiping me with great faith and transcendental love. And that's Arjuna. Arjuna is already thinking of Krishna, you see. So that's a big relief for Arjuna. And then at the beginning of the next chapter, Krishna is giving us a very practical way by which we can fix our mind on Krishna. You don't have to go through all of this isolation and Ashtanga yoga. And so the essence of the Bhagavad Gita, the middle 6 chapters, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. 12 is called Bhakti Yoga. The other chapters kind of support that. We're learning so many important things here. But when we get to 7, it's even more essential. So if your time is limited, stay with us. You can come. We're always here Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But especially when we get to chapter 7. We want to, and you take the book, buy a book and you'll have it with you. You have your own book, you can read, yeah. So any questions? I kind of went on a long time without any questions. But yes, Prabhu. Yeah, we have a mic because we have an audience and through YouTube. We got it here, Chad. Yeah.
Thanks. There was a part that you spoke about trees, people's spirits embodying a tree after their life cycle because they have to experience something
Well,
or learn from something? Like, I guess it kind of sounded like a punishment.
It is. It is a punishment. Can you imagine? I mean, when I came here, I saw these tall trees, when I first came. And he says, they're not really coconut trees, because there's no coconuts there.
Yeah, the palm trees.
Palm trees.
Uh-huh.
But, each one of those palm trees, there's a living being in there. Mm-hmm. And very, very rudimentary consciousness. What do they understand? The sun is out today. I mean, they can't. In other words, there's some consciousness, but it's very rudimentary. But that's the same soul as we are, but their consciousness is very covered, way covered, and ours can be uncovered. But even just an ordinary human being is much more conscious and aware and sensuous. So the point is that wherever we look, we see living beings. All these insects. When I take my walk, I try to. Well, now it's been so cold that the insects are hiding also. But when it gets warmer, I try to not crush any ants. Why? They're living their life. So I try to avoid that. So I'm conscious. So that's the same soul. It's a particle of God there. And they're going through their process and gradually come up, and they'll come up to human beings. So why disrupt that? Why cause them unnecessary suffering? So this is the Vaishnava, the devotee of Krishna, sees the kinship with every living entity. That's one thing. The real pure devotees, they don't hate anyone. They don't have any enmity to anyone. They may be hated, just like Jesus Christ. He had enemies, but he himself had no enmity. You see what I mean? The distinction. So how does that come about? By this awareness of God in everyone. That particle of God, and also the super soul is there in every being. And you see everything that's not alive as Krishna's energy. He has these inanimate energies, and he has the living energies also. He'll describe the hierarchy in the next chapter. So that's one way of seeing God at all times, and not being separated from him. And when you're in the mood and you've been trained to always be in the mood of service, like when I take my walk, I'm not just walking, I'm trying to keep the body healthy, because the body is an instrument by which I can serve Krishna. But at the same time, I'm remembering Krishna by chanting the holy name. So in both senses, I'm serving. I'm serving Krishna by keeping the body healthy, but I'm also serving him by remembering him and chanting his name. So in that way, you can always stay in touch. And the more that we're in touch with Krishna, and the more that we are working for a specific reason for service, the more purified we become, and the more we feel peaceful and happy even in this world. Like I've been, as I mentioned earlier, you weren't here, 51 years, just about a few days ago was my 51st anniversary of being in the temple. 27th March is when I joined. And I never felt, is this for me? It was always, oh, thank God, it's a place. Chanting Hare Krishna. We used to go out 3 hours every day on Harinam, singing and dancing. So it's been 51 years, and I never got married and all that, and so what do I have? I mean, you could say, oh, you didn't achieve anything in your life, but the thing is, hey, I'm still enlivened by chanting and dancing and reading about Krishna, even in this old age. Whereas others who are, living a life where the happiness depends on the senses, oh, when you get this age, the senses don't work so nicely anymore. What, my life does. So you take shelter of, TV or something, or, you're unhappy, basically. Old people, unless you have, there's certain perks you can have. But still, that big, end of it is all coming. No matter how rich you are, the end of it's going to be here. Death is very terrifying. But we've had devotees, young devotees. We had a 36-year-old, Shamali, who passed away. This is a young girl. She grew up in the movement. And she was in our farm community in northern Florida. It's the biggest center in the United States. There's hundreds of devotees there. And she had married one of our alumni, our temple presidents, Bhishma Dev. And they were living there very happily. But then she came down with cancer, just 36 years old. But she was serious about Krishna consciousness, and her spiritual master would call her up from Vrindavan. He was calling all the time, Indrajumna Maharaj, and be with her. And her father and mother went to visit her. They were also devotees, And our friend Yamunapati is a beloved god brother of mine. He's now retired, and anyway, he was staying with her as father, and he described, we had a memorial, that when the end came, she was completely peaceful. It wasn't like what people I saw in the hospital. She was completely peaceful, thinking of Krishna, hearing Krishna's name, I'm sure. And it's like she just expired and went, in a Vaikuntha airplane. So that's exceptional. And we had another very successful departure with Rajendra Nandana and others, Radhanath Das, who's a devotee. Anyway, I've been there because they asked me to sing, because they think I have a nice voice. So I've been singing Hare Krishna for 6 or 8 devotees who departed. It's not like the hospital, They're peaceful. Some of them are smiling, because they're hearing the holy name. So that's a good reason to investigate and practice Krishna consciousness, because we're all going to face that at some time. And to have that advantage of having so many loving devotees, just like our spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, he departed in 1977 in Vrindavan. And he had hundreds of devotees around him, And he showed he was completely fearless. And all the devotees were chanting, and then he just left. And then the chanting went on, and it was tremendously inspiring, And so he showed that, there was no disturbance. And even before, for months, he wasn't eating much, and he became very thin. And the doctor would say any ordinary person would be in agony of this, the bones, next to the nerves. But he was peaceful. Someone would come to visit him, and he would say, "Oh, how are you? Have you gotten any prasadam?" And they would start crying. He's lying on his bed, and he's worrying about their welfare. This is the life of the devotee. So anyway, we'll continue this chapter, and this is a very nice verse because it's practical. If you remember Krishna's instructions in the Bhagavad Gita and you're living as a devotee, you can begin to see God in everything. No question about it. And that's a very good place to be, to always be seeing Krishna. Well, traditionally I end the class with a couple of poems. So here's a poem or two for you. So the basic principle, many of you heard this one before. Every body dies. Every space body dies. No one can deny it, right? Every body dies. Nobody dies. Wake up, and open your eyes. You're not that body or pure spirit soul. Chant the holy name and attain life's goal. The summary of Krishna consciousness. And then just a description of Krishna as he enters the forest of Vrindavan every morning. He's got all his friends around him. He's playing the flute. It's a beautiful painting I brought last night. With lovely peacock plume upon his head, and fragrant flower placed upon each ear, he enters Braja's woods with graceful tread, a handsome dancing actor without peer. His golden yellow raiment brightly glows, his splendid garland reaches to his knees, and from his luscious lips the nectar flows, and fills his flute with charming melodies. As Krishna thus begins his blissful day, with cowherd friends who sing his glory sweet, he beautifies Vrindavan's forest way with fine impressions of his lotus feet. So, if you want, I have a whole file of poetry. If you want, just write to me at Dravida108. If you forget that, you can get it from Chad. He knows my email address. So we'll adjourn now, and we'll gather for the kirtan. And my friend Ram Vilas will lead us. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol. And we'll resume, if you're interested, with the next verse, 32, on Monday. Oh, wait a minute. It's today Tuesday. Oh, tomorrow. Tomorrow, I'm sorry. How could I forget Taco Tuesday? Did you all have some prasadam already out there before? Not yet. Okay. There'll be some afterward. All right. Taco Tuesday. Yeah, we'll begin with 31. Yeah, 31. Yeah.